It's wonderful to be here today on Awakening Dialogues. My name is Will Pye, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Susanne Marie today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to sharing conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We spoke a moment ago, and I asked what you wanted to talk about. And for people that have watched the show a few times before, they'll know that we have a topic, and within us have a dialogue.
Right.
And so this is the exciting place for you and me, where we're like, what's going to be said? We don't know. This is part of the fun.
Yeah.
And you said surrender and its role in awakening, and I was really happy to hear that. It felt like such a juicy topic, and one that's so central, and as you said, something that's not perhaps unknown to myself, and part of what I talk about and so on.
Exactly, yeah.
So surrender is clearly an important piece in the awakening process for you. What is surrender for you? How's that shown up for you?
Surrender has, for me, helped or been a great teacher. Life's been a great teacher, which has
so life sort of
helped
makes you
lead
surrender,
me to surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the teaching leads and then surrender happens. It's not like the surrender is an idea, And I think it really helps loosen the bonds of control, the desire, the need, and the habit to hold on, and when difficult things arise, as they tend to do, health challenges and all kinds of crises can come, and they have come in my life. And to me, all these different challenges have opened up help loosen a knot that was there, that was holding on in a certain kind of way. And it was kind of like this, the knot was my own koan of how to spring that knot free. And the mind would come in and say, how about this way? And how about that way? How to meet this moment or this situation in different kinds of ways. And then suddenly it would get that what it needed, and it wasn't a mind thing, it was way deeper than mind, is that what helped unlock it, whatever the crisis was, or whatever the tense moment, the tension, would be letting go.
And was that something that, because something that often gets spoken about, and I'm hearing it implied or pointed to in what you're speaking of, is who surrenders, or how does surrender happen? Because in the experience of surrender, there's a loosening or a falling away or a letting go.
Right.
And the movement of me trying to surrender, the movement of me wanting to surrender, is the very opposite of that. In my experience, it's like that's me wanting to make something happen. And you spoke of life surrendering us, or that life will do what life does. Will present us with the practice opportunity.
Yeah, the me is kind of, it's like mind, mind still wanting to find a way out, an escape route out of this moment as it's presenting itself, especially when it's difficult. So something deeper than mind, being, life, just kind of like falling back into the unknown is helps loosen that knot, the knot of wanting to find a solution to what's arising, and then over time, I think we get more and more comfortable and sort of at ease with this way.
The first few times
operating.
What comes to mind as a sort of visual is when we're doing those trust exercises and you fall back. And the first few times it can be, I haven't done it a huge amount, but I know there's that sort of fear of like, can I trust? Will someone hold me when I fall back? But of course, once you've done it a few times, it becomes nothing. It becomes very simple and easy.
It does, and yet life will present different kinds of ways that it's challenging
bigger
you.
challenges, or
Yeah,
bigger ways to fall back. Or?
Yeah, exactly. One might be of the body. There might be pain, or a type of uncomfortableness within the body or a health challenge, and another might be more existential. Where where instinct kicks in and there's a fear. And survival, which could come just from, like, say, financial crises, or just something in the moment, or so there are different types of challenges that get presented.
Or opportunities. I like this, the reframe of seeing all these challenges as opportunities.
Yeah, beautiful.
As a way of helping the mind open up or step aside, as you were pointing to.
And at the same time, someone that recently was talking to me about the word challenge, and for me, opportunity is a great way to reframe it. At the same time, there's something kind of lovely about being challenged.
So that can be a word that has positive associations.
It can, sure. We rise to the occasion when we're challenged. And so I think that when life ups the ante and is asking more, from itself, actually, right? So more opportunities to learn how to let go. And how about here, and how about here? And the reason being is because it helps unlock set ways of being, habits, areas inside that believe itself to be separate. Right? So these challenges come up so that integration can happen, and so unity can really start to live in and through us. And so all these places inside that imagine themselves to be separate, or maybe still lie in the unconscious and are coming up from the unconscious to be met, then life presents these opportunities, challenges to be able to meet them. That's how I see it. And it's much more intelligent than we could even imagine. Like, we would never want to handpick those scenarios,
And yet, looking back, it often seems that there has been an intelligence in the picking.
Yeah.
That there's a grading that. So I can look back and sort of sense almost a logical flow to those challenges increasing in terms of the content, the degree to which there was surrender required, or the amount of me that was required to surrender. And with the diagnosis, when I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, that was a total surrender. It was like, okay, I could be dead in the next minute or two, which of course is true for everyone in any moment. But that was a beautiful opportunity and challenge to actually die now, to make that okay now. And that seems, but that was along a continuum of many surrenderings and a fair bit of sitting and so on. So there was that building up to it. There were surrendering to the hurt toe, surrendering to the pain that won't go away in the heart, or whatever it might be. And so what I feel with that is the love of life that's in that grading. It doesn't give us too much too soon, though it can perhaps seem that way. It can seem like it's overestimated our capacities to let go.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we get to raise the bar. The bar gets raised. Yeah, it's a beautiful movement of love, isn't it, for itself?
And for you, surrendering, is it a practice? We've spoken of life being inviting the surrender, and something other than mind, something deeper than the mind, being the surrendering functioning. I'm wondering if there's still an element that's true for you that's like a practice, like, so the mind can remember, yes, lean into this, or let go to this, or say yes to this, or how do you experience that?
Yeah, that's a good question. it has been a practice, and really embraced, a practice that's been embraced, and for the past, I don't know, maybe 14, 15 years, where where something would arise, and this desire to meet it would come in.
Mm-hmm.
So the love affair for self was playing itself out.
Mm-hmm.
So something would arise, just even just a feeling, or something that was wanting attention,
Mm-hmm.
and then the attention would go towards it, and then that meeting was practiced over and over again in my life on a daily, not just daily, but
Minute to minute,
minute to
hour to
minute.
hour.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Where that was being practiced in the daily rhythms of my life, raising 2 children and doing all kinds of things. I remember doing dishes and driving and doing all kinds of things, and having my attention be on what I was doing, but also simultaneously be on what was happening inside.
Mm-hmm.
And this inner meeting
Mm-hmm.
taking place. So that practice. So it's kind of like, I kind of do feel like it is sort of like closing the gap
Mm-hmm.
between what's coming up and then attention
Mm-hmm.
going towards it, and going through it in a sensing kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
not so much with the mind at all.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the body becoming one with it, like
Mm-hmm.
just playing that part of sensing into it.
Mm-hmm.
So not so much like, oh, what is this? I wonder what this is. If it came, which sometimes it did, then that was part of it. But really, it was all about learning how to sense into something, and refining the ability to be a sensing being. Actually, was
Mm-hmm.
taking place, and so that kind of practice really comes in handy when big things happen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, good to start with the small stuff and be
Yeah.
prepared for the big dramas when they happen.
Right. Like what you were saying. You used the word practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a practice, and now what I would say is that it feels so second nature that it's barely perceptible,
Mm-hmm.
and so that gap closing has actually closed the gap for something, feeling like it's really happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was happening now, but it kind of had like a sense of time to it,
Mm-hmm.
because it was bringing in things a little bit from the past that were wanting resolution, that
Mm-hmm.
that was located in the body.
Sure.
Like memory.
Mm-hmm.
Memory was coming up, stored memory, and wanting to be integrated.
Mm-hmm.
And most of it was unknown to itself, and it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's more like that gap has closed so much in this instantaneous kind of way that it feels like it's just now, much
Mm-hmm.
more now, with very little self-reflection happening in regards to it. Does that
So
make
it's sort of,
sense?
it does. It
Mm-hmm.
speaks to this process of training the brain or training the mind or
Mm-hmm.
the physiology, the nervous system to respond to stimuli in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And once that's become conditioned or habituated, and we've observed that this kind of works, that this is a good way of being with stimuli, it then takes care of itself. So it's kind of like it is a practice, but it's not something that's being practiced. So it's a practice in the sense that it's happening regularly, it's happening ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
I've surrendered today, we could say,
Mm-hmm.
and yet it's there's less control in the surrender. There's less me involved in the surrendering.
What is your process now like?
So it would be certainly a shift and focus and remembering of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So to be feeling what is,
Mm-hmm.
and to be less concerned with what thoughts are saying about what is. It resonated when you spoke of being practicing or remembering being a sensing being. Actually just sort of stripping down to basics and being comfortable in that, uh, absorbing the information that's here, whatever that information is. So absorbing the crushing pain over the heart as much as we'd absorb the driver in front of us driving in a way that we think is not how they should be driving. And so there's a sort of body posture for me, rather than the leaning back falling exercise. It's a sort of leaning in, and leaning in heart first. So it's kind of, but that's not to say that I walk around doing this all the time. Or maybe I should. Maybe that would be a helpful reminder. Yeah. And I think the distinction that you were pointing to is that this feeling, this sensing, is always happening now. Whereas thought is usually occupied in some linearity of time. It's imagining a future and the past and so on. It kind of positions itself in this idea of time, or in this psychological time. But the felt sense is always here and now. So that seems to be, as I'm talking this, it seems to be part of the advantage of the practice. The feeling can only happen now. And thoughts can arise now, of course. In this moment, thoughts can arise, but there's something different about the quality of the thoughts generally, in where they will cause attention to focus. It's more likely to be in that continuity of moments after moments, rather than this one right now. And of course, it's this one right now that we have the invitation to surrender into.
And you brought up the person. You brought it up a few times. And I'm not like turning around the interview like you said you guys did in your last one. But yeah, it's a conversation, right? So what were you meaning about the person having to do with this surrender process?
I think I'd be pointing to the sense of me surrendering. So the sense of me being in control, a psychological entity that's separate to the world and in control of this. So I can manipulate this to my desire and liking if I surrender. So it's a process happening within the mind, or it's a process happening within psychology. And yet there seems to be a validity in that, because that experience, or that process, or that engagement of the mind can be what allows the mind to fall away. So it seems like it's true to say that there's no one surrendering, there's no one involved in the surrendering, there's no practice. And it seems, in my experience, also true to say that, and also there is an ongoing way of engaging that at times may involve intent and volition. And that distinction between a person volitionally surrendering and the surrendered nature of what we are, or the surrendered nature of being itself, that doesn't need to surrender, right? Life or awareness is in a constant surrenderedness to what is arising. It seems that we access that, we realize this more fully through a practice. So, as so often I find there's a paradox. There's no one surrendering, and indeed there's a volitional surrender that happens. But I think what's true also, that in the powerful shifts, that's tended to be life taking care of it. That's tended to be that there was no choice, no experience of choice even. It's just like, okay,
right.
Life sort of puts us on our knees,
exactly,
as it were, and to see the love in that, within that being on our knees, within our sort of monotheistic traditions, it can be the punishing, vengeful, wrathful God, and yet for me to be brought to one's knees is the greatest love in these challenges, because we're in a place of authenticity, I think, on our knees. I remember I wrote an essay once, many years ago, why I will be humble one day. And it was recognizing that I was pretty far from humility, but that it was a sound position to take with life, to really just to recognize the vastness of our ignorance and the limitations of our perceptions and knowledge and understanding. And so I've been grateful that life has helped that humbling process. And of course, I should be careful what I say, because it always seems to be willing, as we were speaking, to take us to that next level, right?
Let's see what's next.
What's around the corner? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I trust that whatever it will be something I can handle, or if I can't handle it, then that will be its beauty, that will be its brilliance.
That's nice. I think it does build trust.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of practice of surrendering in the moment,
mm-hmm.
to the moment, creates increasing trust in a reliance on something that isn't volition
mm-hmm.
based. That is the divine intelligence of life itself.
For me, trust and surrender are kind of almost synonyms. They're very much interlinked. And if I've had a practice over the last few years, I sit and stretch and do all these wonderful things, but trusting and surrendering would be the words that I would give to the process. Just deepening and deepening and deepening and deepening and deepening. It's beautiful even to come back to the trust piece now for me. Isn't it interesting how we can dive so deep into something and we can write books on it and so on, and then years later we come back to the very same thing, the very same word, and there's something new there, there's something that we haven't touched before, or that we had forgotten was part of this.
The muscle that life is helping build of leaning into trust and letting go of lifeboats and the edge of the edge of the river, but just letting
no insurance go. Policy,
right? And just letting the river take you, take one, is it takes care of the sense of relying on the need to be a person. That the strength of the separate self relaxes its hold, because something else is guiding, something else is being leaned on, right? And that's something, it lives and operates in a totally different dimension and way of being, which is one of trust and surrender. But it is that. It's not doing it. It just is that. And it's a flow in a way, but it's a flow in the moment. And so, for instance, when a crisis comes up and you're, saying things almost prepare you for being able to be present to something that might be big, and then maybe a new grappling will happen just in that moment, for just a moment, because it's when it's propelled into a greater unknown, if it's a big thing, and then that kind of inner training kicks in, and it's not the me that's doing it, it's life that's doing it, and it just lets go. And that's the only way that one is going to actually, my experience is to fall through. And a few major times in my life when it's been so big that it's built up to that kind of thing, where like this spring, I had a health and home crisis. And so I got environmentally ill from my apartment, And then so I lost my place to live, and I became increasingly ill.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the emergency room twice, and I was pretty sick. And so I was not too far from here, and on the coast here in Northern California, taking a walk, and it kind of came to a head inside of myself, like the unresolvable nature of my situation
Mm-hmm.
rose up, and in this kind of crisis of the unresolvable nature of it, like I couldn't find a way out of my situation.
And was there a handing over of the situation, or?
So what happened is there was this like surrender to the fact that I couldn't resolve it, and that I
Mm-hmm.
was powerless in the face of this, that there was nothing that I could do. My mind stopped trying to figure
Mm-hmm.
anything out. And I wasn't even aware how much it was kind of going around on a conscious way of like, what if I did this? What if I did
Mm-hmm.
that? But like so many ways were closing themselves in,
Mm-hmm.
and there was not a resolution at hand in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was an acknowledgement inside, there's nothing I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a crisis of form, like form, instinctual fear, just like home, health, finances, all those things, all came to a head.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm hearing that with that,
mm-hmm.
recognizing the limitation of what I can do, that there was something either intuited or soon realized that there was something that life could do, or that there was an intelligence taking care of this, or was that a piece of it for you, that a deepened trust, or did you have to practice the trust in
No,
this?
no, actually, so what happened is that something else actually occurred, where it was like this koan, right? Unresolvable thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just it stopped trying to resolve itself
Mm-hmm.
through surrender, without just going into unknown, not as a practice even, and not as and to get an end result, but just like as a true spontaneous letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And what came out of it was almost like a rebirth into another way of being, like another type of awakening occurred through
Mm-hmm.
that. And so it's like over time, different. It's been 2 or 3 times. This is maybe the third where, and with like 10-year spans or 5-year spans in between, of where a situational circumstances, create a type of crises for me. And in between, there have been like openings that weren't crisis oriented,
Sure.
that actually opened me up to a deeper letting go into life, which actually is really about more of the sense of being the separate self falling away in places where it was still hiding out.
Mm-hmm. Which you'd expect it to around those sort of core, having enough food or a place to stay and so
Yeah.
on. It brings to mind for me, a friend of mine recently asked me, how often have you died? Or how many times have you died?
Yeah.
And I had to sort of dig a little as to what he was really asking me.
Mm.
But I found that he was speaking of these sorts of events,
Yeah.
where there's a little death of self that occurs, where a part of who we are dies in that moment. And of course, to put it another way, we're reborn. We're reborn into a deeper trust, or we're reborn into something. And so it's interesting to hear you speak of there's been a recent one and other occasions as well. I think I can find the same sort of overall arc in my own experience, in my own narrative. There are those events, and I think he and we both spoke of there being like 3 or 4 times that we. So once I understood what he was speaking of when he was saying how many times that you had died, I was like, oh yes, there was boom, boom, boom. Those
Beautiful.
key events in life became very clear. And this is a radical reframing of how we normally experience crises, right? We normally speak of crises as being the really bad stuff and it's terrible, and yet here we're looking at it as staged aspects of a unification, or a remembrance or a coming home to the true self, to the vastness that we are.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love how you're saying that, because it was a dying, and that's how I would describe it. And it was you know, Adyashanti, he talks about these different types of awakenings, and one of them is the gut. It felt like a gut opening. The instinctual fear, you know, survival, what's located in the body, you know, form being fused with identity and sense of self, and that came to a crisis through the crisis, and then it sprung loose, and it was like another death, but it was another awakening too, and very freeing, with which actually thins out even more any kind of sense of self, the dissolving of self. To me, it has an intelligence to it, and how it occurs, the dissolution of self.
It sounds like powerless, or realizing I am powerless in this unresolvable situation. That was part of because when I realized that, what can I do but say, okay, you know, come what may.
Exactly. It is, and it's a the any kind of stronghold, I feel like, wherever identity is still holding on to
its own creation.
In its own creation. It's just that I don't find identity a negative. It's just that there's a time for things to be born and a time for things to return back to source. And I feel like this evolutionary kind of enlightenment drive to wake up, it's not so much about becoming, it's more about unbecoming. And so and not that consciousness isn't still learning and developing through the unbecoming. There's lots of growth and learning that happens through the process of unbecoming. But really, in my view, my experience is that there's a return. It's a return phase of consciousness that has a time of being born, and it might be this lifetime or it might be lifetimes. And then it has a time of dissolution and of returning. And so it's kind of like the sandcastle being taken slowly by the sea. Every time it comes in, it's taking a bit more. And sometimes the structure of its foundation collapses. And that's kind of what felt like happened to me, this late spring through this crisis.
And suddenly destruction and death. And a friend, Adam Bucko, I saw speak at the Science and Non-Duality Conference. He spoke of being cut to pieces, being chopped to pieces. And I think many people in the audience could recognize what he was speaking to. And again, to reframe that, rather than as being you know, the punishment of a wrathful God, or the you know, a failure or indication of something wrong with me, but to see it as a part of a process of evolution, part of a process of personal awakening. And I always love this question of Albert Einstein asking, or stating that the most important question we can ask is the universe friendly? And so to be able to see these evidences of its unfriendliness, being chopped to pieces, having the health crises and the place to live taken away and so on, and the unresolvability, that the powerlessness of that, all that, but yet to find at the heart of that a friendliness or a love, something that's I think there's something quite sweet in that, very sweet in that.
That's sweet. Yeah, I went through a phase, and I think it was important for me actually to go through really finding the universe neutral. And I mean, that lasted for years. And so neither friendly nor unfriendly, but there was just a true movement inside. It wasn't like, I'm going to try this out for size, or I'm in rebellion to the friendly universe paradigm. Or I'm, because in the past with an ego center, when we have mostly an ego center, we see it mostly as an unfriendly place. So for me, it was like this nice long period because I'm kind of a scientist of my own self.
Mm-hmm.
I have to find things out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading a while back that Byron Katie said that the universe is a friendly place.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, really, is that true?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure she would have been happy to
Yeah,
hear
right,
that
right,
question
right.
being asked.
Really, what is your, show me some proof. But and I so I needed to find out for myself. She had found out for herself, but she
Mm-hmm.
was using that, and everyone who may hear that needs to find out for themselves, which not what she might mean, but what it means to oneself.
Yeah.
Right.
I understand that on retreats that Byron Katie has led, someone has told me that going out and simply saying to someone, "Can you feed me?" or "Will you feed me?" So no money. Simply that's the phrase you're allowed to say, to go into a cafe or approach a stranger and say, "Will you feed me?"
Wow.
To discover or not. I mean, who knows what that will bring up? I can imagine so much. I
Yeah.
think one of the things it would bring up is the degree of trust or
Mm.
fear that's in me, what it is to ask for help, and maybe even to discover how friendly or unfriendly the universe is.
Well, right, and I mean that's an interesting exercise, but the type of and friendliness that I feel like you're pointing to is deeper,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that is whether someone says no or yes, can they feed you or they ignore you. That you discover that the response that you have inside is teaching you something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then that
That you
is
can
what,
even be okay without food, for example.
yeah,
That might be part of a
right. What is
discovery.
it like to be hungry?
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you get to learn through that? And what is it? What kind of process does it put you through? Does it put you through a process where you get to go through all the layers of feeling like a victim and feeling unsupported and all these things?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps it opens you up to empathy and compassion to the people who don't have food.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps it brings you to a deeper reliance on some part of you didn't know you had.
Mm-hmm.
So these different journeys that life puts us through, that in the end we get to then discover for ourselves what friendly really means. And it's
Uh-huh.
not at all what someone might interpret as being in your favor or something that's looking good.
Yeah, a friendliness beyond form. Um, and something there that you touched on that I really like is this discovery of something in us that's stronger than we had thought, or discovering
Mm,
something within us that's more true than we had thought.
yeah.
And the process by which uh, surrendering can bring us into contact with that power. And there's this wonderful, I'm a quote geek, and there's this one of Sri Aurobindo's that it's in his long poem. His vast surrender was his only strength.
Mm,
So this just touches on something, because particularly in the highly individualized West, and where we speak a lot about personal power and so on,
mm,
I think there can be a resistance to the idea of surrender,
mm.
because of course it implies that we wave the white flag and we give up. And there's a truth in that there is a giving up, there is a waving of the white flag, and yet to dangle the carrot for the ego, for the mind, it seems helpful to point out that this is actually accessing a far deeper power, a far deeper friendliness than the mind could create, or volition could summon in and of itself. So this seems to speak to the surrender as a root of discovering the strength that we have, or discovering the the friendliness that's within us.
Mm. It's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, the waving the white flag. If we only knew that what it meant to wave the white flag, and that we're that self is grinding down the need to to assert the separate self.
And they need to be at war, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to continue the
Mm-hmm.
metaphor there of the waving the white flag,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how much time and energy does the human collectively spend,
Mm-hmm.
pushing against what is,
Exactly.
pushing against the way that our partners communicate to us, or pushing against the weather,
Yeah.
pushing against life in general, and undo that and to put down the tools of war, to put down those constructions of consciousness. Yeah, it seems to be a powerful process.
Mm-hmm. Are we coming around full circle?
A victory. I'm not sure, are we? We might be.
Maybe.
What's your sense?
Yeah, so maybe the part of the full circle coming out of that is touching maybe on awakening, and we have been, um, and its implications. Surrender, letting go of control, the process, the slow grinding down of the need to assert self is the journey of what is it? The journey of
The journey of
returning,
awakening or
returning
returning?
home.
Mm-hmm.
We're returning to the home in a way that is just at ease and peace in a way with what is, and ready to be with whatever arises, even if it doesn't feel peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the greater sense of what we were talking about in terms of it being a friendly universe.
Mm-hmm.
So being at ease and peaceful, not as a state of consciousness, but as a place that is grounded in being.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it meets what is arising.
And being peace is such a valuable thing, as it were, to be, or to offer the vibrational frequency of peace in a world that's generally not so peaceful.
Yeah.
We want to. It seems that there's something in the surrender piece often when this, to come back to that again, the giving up of power. So or to do nothing. Sometimes that's what is heard when we speak of surrender. It's like, well, to surrender to the world's pain and problems. This does not mean necessarily to do nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It means simply that in itself, to surrender. And from that, huge action might or might not stem.
Yeah, that's very beautiful.
And it's a different quality of action, I think.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point.
When we're coming from that place, there's usually a clarity that's there. So there's a greater intelligence. It's a reaction, or rather a response or an action from that place of unity, from that place of life itself, from that place of being. And predictably, that's a little bit more intelligent than what my mind can come up with.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's really good that you're bringing up that point, that surrender is not it contains a type of feminine passivity within it, of letting go the reins of control, the contracting force of that tends to be kind of an ego-driven thing to
and
contract.
Tends to be more masculine.
Well, surrendering, I don't know if that is more masculine. I'm just using the surrendering actually more in just as a metaphor of being more of a feminine principle, and that action can come out of that. And that, I don't really like to divide life up so much into masculine and feminine, but in this way, because you're saying, but it's not necessarily an unpowerful thing, or it's surrender,
or an
is
irresponsible thing.
Right.
Sometimes people pick that up, that it's sort of letting the world burn, and yet it can be an act of incredible compassion to actually say yes to things as they are, to surrender to things as they are.
Right. And then my I guess my further point would be in that regard is that then when you were making that point too, is that true action arises, and it's not motivated by fear. It's not motivated by a need to assert itself because it doesn't know what to do. It arises from the unknown, but it suddenly knows. So to me, like, surrender puts one into the unknown, and that's where the person can't enter that. It's like the kingdom of heaven or something, in the eye of the needle. A person can't go through it. What surrenders is not the person. The person is left at the doorstep, if there's any person still left in this process anyway. But what comes out the other side is stripped bare of identity, and then it has a capacity to know what's needed. That's, to me, what surrender really opens one up to.
And this knowing, if I'm hearing you correctly, is more a matter of the heart. So when I hear knowing, I'm thinking of an instantaneous, we just sometimes know. It's often without thought, that there is just a knowing, and that is located for me in the heart, which we were speaking about. I was speaking about leaning in with the heart. We were speaking about feeling more, or being a sense being, becoming accustomed to that. And so it seems again that there's a piece in that this knowing that can be found in the recognition of our ignorance, or in the vastness of the not knowing, is found right here. It's found in our felt sense. So in that letting go of ideas of being the intelligent one, or the smart one, or the one that's in control, in the letting go of all that, we discover something that's far more authentically intelligent, far more authentically clever than the identity that liked to think it was so smart. I know that's been big for me. When I was growing up, being intelligent, that was one of the identities that was crafted and created. And of course, life in its generosity consistently brought me face to face with my own stupidity and ignorance to dissolve and diminish that identity. And it seems interesting that through this surrender, through this saying, I don't know, sort of inviting, you tell me, as it were, or you tell me to access that intelligence that is part of being itself, that is part of life itself. So it just seems to be valuable to emphasize this surrendering to life itself, or surrendering to being itself, is the greatest victory, or the greatest gain. There's something immeasurably precious that we discover in really just falling back and seeing if we're going to be held, discovering for ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that process, it develops what, back to our earlier part of our conversation about trust. And then the something else gets to, it's almost like this other type of way of being is being built and being is growing in capacity to almost like, in this very kind, generous way, in a friendly way, replace the one that needed to know. It's like it moves out of the way as this other way of being starts to take hold. It's like almost like a new kind of body, or a new way of being is occupying this old way. And so it's almost like, then the more that happens, I think that's more like the more that it's kind of like abiding awakening, what they talk about abiding in a certain kind of way. There are different ways that abiding shows up. Abiding meaning that it's not in fits, right? It's continuous. So in this way of speaking, because abiding has a lot of different types of, a lot of places that we wake up, a lot of areas that we wake up, the heart, the mind, and now the gut too, and maybe other ways that we wake up, right? It's like the intelligence starts to kind of occupy what before was being led by mostly more by identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of like the heart, for instance, like if something else moves, it moves in, and what the fear-based being, the one that was closed-hearted, needed to know, and all that moves away, moves kindly. It's a generous thing.
That sounds like evolution to me. That sounds like a sort of falling
Yeah.
away of the more reptilian and animalistic operating
Mm-hmm.
of the human animal, and an emergence of a vessel for life itself to express through. I've heard people talking about Homo sapiens becoming Homo spiritus and so on. These sorts of different,
Mm-hmm.
an entirely different way of being, as you were pointing to.
Yeah.
And that's it seems that surrender is a route into this evolution, a way that we can apparently quicken the process, that we can take large steps forward by surrendering to what is.
And just going to you quoted Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo earlier, and he spoke about the divine human,
Mm-hmm.
matter itself becoming conscious,
Mm-hmm.
and it was beautiful. I mean, he was such a vanguard. He spoke about things that people are still not fully haven't caught up to.
Mm-hmm.
The possibilities of the divine human.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this kind of, and it's not necessarily my paradigm, but just to bring that in, I see that this reoccupation of being, being occupying itself, what's always been here, but, just like fully consciously occupying
Mm-hmm.
is like the divine human. And then so much alchemy happens, matter becoming more conscious to itself,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. And so I think that over time, the gap does close to where surrender is just a way of being.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's part
The
of your
trust is
everyday language.
so accessible that it's just very easy.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, no, I would say very easy. I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting that there won't be future events where I'm immensely challenged. I hope so, and I expect so. And yet, generally, it is the case that whatever's being presented, whether it be in relationship or in life's vagaries or finances and so on, it seems there's an already let go-ness, a recognition that there's something that's taking care of all this, and that something might require action, it might require movement in certain directions and so on, but the primary job here, if you like, is to surrender to that, to let thine will be done again
Mm-hmm.
and again and again, and ultimately perhaps to recognize that thine will and my will are simply the will, the will of the one, the will of life itself. But it seems that the practice of surrender can help us come into contact with that, to experience that as true for ourselves, that this whole idea of me being in control of a life is just that. It's to quote a favorite teacher of mine, it's a figment of the divine imagination. It's a lovely artifice by which being, consciousness, navigates reality. It sort of pops up this little Will Pie experience in order to have this experience as itself, and then through surrender, allowing itself to recognize itself, which is rather exquisite. There are worse ways to spend an afternoon anyway.
Oh, right, and fun to talk about it. And I had to laugh for a moment when you said perhaps it can become thy will and my will be one, and of course for me the answer is of course it's possible, and that is what realization can lead to, and that's why there are these these deaths before you die, that occur to help make sure that happens. And it's very intelligently manufactured and guided, and that's the part where we get to really start knowing in fact that it's a friendly universe. And even though a friend, say one has a friend that doesn't know that, or a community member, or is not aware of that, to hold that knowing for one that one has for oneself, also for them, even if they don't quite know it yet.
Uh-huh.
Just in a loving and kind way, not asserting one's paradigm on anyone, but just it's a prayer, really.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up being a prayer, like, because we know for ourselves how it has been hard, and necessarily really believing in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's a transformation that happens with one's mind,
mm-hmm.
as experience takes place.
And it has to be through that experience, is what I'm hearing you point to as well. You can't proselytize it or preach it or
right.
Pass it on to someone, unfortunately. It'd be great if you could.
No, right. It's a modeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's a modeling, not like this is how I do it, mm-hmm. but more like rather a modeling energetically, mm-hmm. yeah. Right? And I think that's the beauty of the of being guided to share and to speak about this. I mean, because here we mm-hmm. are sharing, mm-hmm. and we're sharing with an audience. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll see.
Hopefully.
And is that it's a transmission of love for the process, and understanding of and having walked it, how difficult it can be, mm-hmm. compassion for it, mm-hmm. for the process, and then this and there really is something, like the good news. Mm-hmm. We'll sing the good news. We'll preach the good news.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Yeah, the good news. I really did make this my own science experiment. It wasn't just on faith or belief at all, mm-hmm. So came to an understanding here that there really is something to this stuff, mm-hmm. that there is really that surrender and letting go and learning how to not be in resistance to life, and to stop running, mm-hmm. That actually it pays off. Mm-hmm. And then we get to actually really be here. And then there's this piece that's always been here, like they say in literature for thousands of years. We can find out for ourselves what's true.
Mm-hmm. The peace that passeth all understanding.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Worth dying for several times, at least. It feels like we've reached that natural point.
Yep.
Thank you so much for
Thank you too.
being with me today.
Yeah, it's lovely
Susanne.
Being with you, getting to know you a little bit.
Yeah. A real joy.